For 8 months, he thought he was taking women to catch flights. In reality, he was delivering them to predators. Same street, same time, same request. Airport, please. 15 women. 8 months. Not one ever came back. One night, he followed a passenger and found no airport. Only a warehouse where they never came out. And if he hadn't acted that night, the next woman might never have been found. Diego Martinez had been driving a taxi in the city for 12 years, working the night shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. He covered the downtown area and business districts where late-night workers, partygoers, and travelers needed reliable transportation. Diego thought he had seen everything during his years on the road. Drunk college students stumbling home, exhausted office workers catching late flights, tourists exploring the city's nightlife. But nothing in his 12 years of experience had prepared him for what he would discover on a cold Tuesday evening in March. The pattern that would change Diego's life forever began with a simple ride request to 1847 Elm Street, a quiet residential neighborhood about 10 minutes from downtown. When Diego arrived at the address, he found a young woman in her early 20s waiting on the sidewalk. She was well-dressed in professional clothing and carried a small suitcase, exactly what Diego would expect from someone catching a late-night flight. Her appearance was perfect, but something in her eyes suggested fear beneath the polished surface. "Airport, please," she said politely as she settled into the back seat, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly. During the 25-minute ride, Diego noticed she kept checking her phone nervously and looking over her shoulder through the rear window, as if worried about being followed. Diego assumed she was anxious about missing her flight. Many travelers got stressed about airport timing, especially for late departures. She paid in cash with exact change plus a generous tip, thanked him quietly, and disappeared into the terminal building. Diego thought nothing unusual about the ride until 3 days later, when he received another pickup request from the exact same address at exactly 11 p.m. This time, a different young woman was waiting, also well-dressed, also carrying luggage, also requesting the airport. Like the previous passenger, she seemed nervous and kept checking her surroundings during the ride, paid in cash, and never made conversation. Diego began to wonder if 1847 Elm Street housed some kind of airline employees or flight attendants with irregular schedules. Over the following weeks, he received regular pickup requests from 1847 Elm Street, always at 11 p.m., always with young women passengers who needed airport transportation. The pattern was so consistent that he started positioning himself in the area around 10:45 p.m. to ensure quick response times. The passengers were always different women, but they shared similar characteristics. They appeared to be in their 20s, were nicely dressed, carried small amounts of luggage, and seemed anxious during the rides. But something else bothered him even more. By the end of his first month, he had transported 8 different women from 1847 Elm Street to the airport. All paid in cash, never used credit cards, and none ever engaged in casual conversation. Most concerning was the realization that he had never seen the same passenger twice, and none had ever called for return rides from the airport. In 12 years of taxi driving, he had developed many regular customers, but the women from Elm Street seemed to vanish completely after their airport trips. And then he made a disturbing discovery. His curiosity turned to genuine concern when he decided to drive past 1847 Elm Street during daylight hours. To his surprise, the address was not a hotel or business. It was a modest single-family home in a quiet residential neighborhood. The house appeared well-maintained but unremarkable, with no signs indicating commercial activity or temporary housing. He couldn't understand how a regular family home was generating multiple different women needing airport transportation several times per week. If I kept driving, was I becoming part of this? What he observed next made his blood run cold. As he continued his regular pickups from Elm Street, he began paying closer attention to details that troubled him. The women often appeared to have been crying recently, despite their professional appearance. Some had visible bruises they tried to cover with makeup, and many seemed disoriented or confused about their surroundings. One young woman's hands shook so badly she couldn't count her money properly. Another whispered what sounded like prayers during the entire ride. Was I still just a driver, or something much darker? And then came the passenger, who would change everything. The turning point came in July when he picked up a passenger who would haunt his thoughts for weeks. Anna was a young woman who wore distinctive red earrings that caught the streetlight like tiny sparks of hope in the darkness. She had a visible scar on her left hand and seemed particularly frightened, whispering silent prayers during most of the ride. Anna's behavior was different from the other passengers. She seemed to be building courage for something important. Just before getting out at the airport, Anna turned to him with tears in her eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "Please remember me if something happens." The words hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't anxiety about missing a flight. This was a desperate plea from someone who believed she might not survive whatever was waiting for her. Anna's red earrings caught the airport lights one last time as she walked toward the terminal, and he knew he would never forget her face or her plea. By August, he had transported 15 different women from 1847 Elm Street to the airport. Always 11 p.m. Always cash payments. Never any return trips. He began researching flight schedules and realized there were very few legitimate departing flights after 11:30 p.m., which meant these women would have to wait hours in the airport for morning departures. The mathematical impossibility of the situation, combined with Anna's desperate plea, convinced him that something criminal was happening. But the truth was far worse than he could have imagined. The opportunity to discover the truth came on a humid evening in August when he received his regular pickup request from 1847 Elm Street. This time, he picked up Carmen, a young woman who seemed more terrified than any previous passenger. Carmen was trembling throughout the entire ride, clutching a broken gold necklace in her hands while whispering prayers in Spanish. He could see fresh bruises on her arms and noticed her eyes were red from crying. When they reached the airport, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of driving away after Carmen got out, he parked in a distant lot and watched to see where she actually went. His hands gripped the steering wheel as he wrestled with his conscience. He could drive away, pretend he saw nothing, and continue earning money from these rides. Or he could follow Carmen and risk discovering something that would change his life forever. And that night, he decided to follow her. He followed Carmen at a distance and watched in shock as she didn't enter the main airport terminal. Instead, she walked toward a side road that led away from the airport complex entirely. He quietly followed her path in his taxi, expecting to see the glow of airport lights ahead. What he saw instead was darkness. 2 miles from the actual airport, his headlights revealed something that made his blood run cold. A large, windowless warehouse with no signs, no windows, just heavy metal doors surrounded by silence. What he witnessed next would haunt him forever. He parked his taxi in the shadows and watched as Carmen approached the warehouse and knocked on the door. The door opened briefly, just long enough for her to disappear inside, then slammed shut again. Around the building, he could see multiple vehicles, other taxis, unmarked vans, and cars that didn't belong in an industrial area at midnight. The air reeked of gasoline and fear, and somewhere inside, a muffled scream made his chest tighten. His stomach twisted as the horrifying truth crashed over him like a wave. For 8 months, he had been unknowingly delivering women to their captors. The fake airport destination had been a clever cover story designed to make taxi drivers complicit in a trafficking operation without their knowledge. The criminals were using legitimate transportation services to move their victims, making the operation appear normal to drivers who didn't ask questions. He felt physically sick as he calculated that he had personally delivered 15 young women to this warehouse prison, including Anna, with her desperate plea to be remembered. He knew he needed concrete evidence before calling police. From his hidden position behind a nearby building, he used his phone to take photos of the warehouse, the vehicles surrounding it, and license plates of cars that clearly belonged to the criminals. He could see lights inside the windowless building and shadows of people moving around, suggesting that multiple victims and traffickers were inside. The scale of the operation was larger than he had imagined. But what he saw at 1 a.m. broke his heart completely. Around 1 a.m., he witnessed something that confirmed his worst fears. Two men emerged from the warehouse and began loading what appeared to be unconscious or heavily drugged women into the back of a large truck. He counted 6 women being moved, and his heart broke as he recognized at least 3 of them as passengers he had transported in previous months. The warehouse wasn't just a holding facility. It was a distribution center where victims were prepared for transport to other locations. He immediately called 911, his voice shaking as he reported what he was witnessing. 15 women in 8 months, he told the emergency dispatcher. I drove them all here. I need you to understand, this is not random. This is a system. He provided the warehouse address, described the vehicles and people he could see, and explained his months of unknowing participation in the trafficking operation. The dispatcher took his report seriously and assured him that police units were being dispatched immediately. He was instructed to stay in his vehicle and avoid confronting the criminals, as they were likely armed and dangerous. Within 15 minutes, he saw unmarked police cars arriving at the warehouse with their lights turned off to avoid alerting the traffickers. Tactical officers moved silently to surround the building while negotiators attempted to establish communication with the people inside. He provided additional information to the responding officers about the number of victims he had seen and the vehicles that belonged to the criminals. The police operation to breach the warehouse was swift and coordinated. Officers entered through multiple access points simultaneously to prevent the traffickers from harming their victims or destroying evidence. Diego watched from his taxi as the rescue unfolded, knowing that his decision to follow Carmen had triggered this moment of justice. The sounds of shouting and commands echoed through the industrial area as police secured the building and began evacuating victims. When the warehouse doors opened and victims began emerging, Diego saw the full scope of the horror he had helped uncover. 23 women and girls, ranging in age from 16 to 25, were led to safety by police officers and medical personnel. Many appeared to have been drugged, and all showed signs of physical abuse and psychological trauma. Some could barely walk, while others seemed disoriented and confused about what was happening. As the women were being led to ambulances and safety vehicles, one of them caught Diego's attention. It was Anna, her red earrings catching the police floodlights like beacons of survival. Her head turned slowly, scanning faces in the crowd of officers and rescue workers, searching for something or someone. And then her eyes found Diego standing near his taxi. And then she saw him. Through her tears, Anna pointed directly at Diego and called out, "That's him. That's the taxi driver who tried to help us." Her voice cracked with a mixture of relief and disbelief, the sound of someone who had been waiting to be seen and remembered. Anna's recognition sent a wave of both crushing guilt and overwhelming relief through Diego as he realized these were the faces he had been unknowingly delivering to this nightmare for 8 months. Police arrested 4 men found inside the warehouse and identified them as key operators in a trafficking network that had been active for over 2 years. The warehouse contained extensive evidence of systematic exploitation, including computers used for illegal online activities and documentation showing that victims had been sold to other criminal organizations. Diego's detailed records of his pickups from 1847 Elm Street provided crucial evidence that helped investigators understand the full scope of the operation. The investigation revealed that 1847 Elm Street was a staging location where victims were prepared for transport to the warehouse. The traffickers had been acquiring young women through various criminal means, holding them at their residential location, and using taxi services to move them to the warehouse for further exploitation. Diego's regular pickup schedule had become an integral part of the traffickers' operational routine, making him an unwitting but essential component of their criminal enterprise. But what police would uncover next was even darker. The investigation into the trafficking network that Diego had exposed became one of the largest criminal cases in the city's history. Police discovered that the organization had been operating for over 3 years and had trafficked more than 200 victims through their network of warehouses and staging locations throughout the region. Diego's testimony and evidence were crucial in helping investigators map the full scope of the criminal operation and identify additional locations where victims had been held. All 23 women rescued from the warehouse required extensive medical treatment and psychological counseling to recover from their trauma. Many had been missing for months or years, and their families had never stopped searching for them. Diego attended several victim reunification ceremonies and was deeply moved by the gratitude expressed by the rescued women and their families. Anna, her red earrings now polished and gleaming as symbols of her survival, hugged Diego tightly and said, "You remembered me. You saved us all." Carmen still wore pieces of her broken necklace, now carefully mended, as a reminder of her survival and strength. The 4 men arrested at the warehouse were convicted on multiple charges including human trafficking, kidnapping, and organized criminal activity. Roberto Silva, the leader of the network, received a sentence of life in prison without parole. The other 3 men received sentences ranging from 35 to 50 years in prison. Additional arrests were made as the investigation expanded, ultimately resulting in the conviction of 12 individuals involved in the broader trafficking network. Diego received recognition from the police department, mayor's office, and several anti-trafficking organizations for his role in exposing the criminal network and saving dozens of lives. Law enforcement officials praised Diego's attention to detail and courage in investigating suspicious patterns, noting that his actions had prevented many additional kidnappings and had shut down a major trafficking operation. Diego's story became part of training programs for taxi and rideshare drivers about recognizing signs of human trafficking. The case led to significant changes in how transportation companies screen for potential criminal use of their services. The house at 1847 Elm Street was seized by authorities